What's going on, everybody? My name is Nick.
And my name is Dave.
And this is the Deep Dive, and we are in week 2 of our Generosity of the Heart series.
That's right.
Today, we're focusing in on encouragement, acts of kindness, and just using our words for good as opposed to bad.
Right.
So-
You're a very encouraging, kind of fellow.
I try to be.
You are.
I'm actually, one of my love languages is words of affirmation. So for me to give it, but also to receive, that's words are important to me.
Right. And I think that's reflected in the Gospels and Jesus' words and in Paul's words. And so we're going to talk all about that today.
Let's do it.
All right.
Well, Dave, we had a great Mother's Day weekend here at the church.
What's going on?
Hopefully, mothers, you guys feel loved and refreshed after this weekend. But, do you do any major celebrations?
Major, no. I mean,
Yeah.
I got the flowers for both my wife and my mother-in-law and my daughter and her son. My daughter and her husband.
Yes.
My son-in-law came over and we had a nice little meal together and
Nice.
kind of hung out. How about you?
Yeah, I left church. We went straight to my sister's house. We did a whole Mother's Day brunch and let's see. And then after that, Rachel's mom came over. So we had a full day of festivities for mom.
But it was Rachel's birthday around the same time.
Yeah,
as
Rachel's
Mother's
birthday was last week. So,
Yeah.
so
For the whole week, what is it, like a festival?
pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah, we just kind of celebrate. She kind of goes into like, this is my week.
Yes. Celebrate me.
Let me nap,
Yeah.
eat my favorite things, and relax.
I would definitely show up for like a festival of Rachel.
Would you?
Yeah. If that became a...
What do you think would be a part of Festival of Rachel?
Lots of costumes.
Yes.
Yeah.
She likes a good theme.
Yeah. Lots of costumes. Yeah. A theme, lots of decorations. Yeah. Cool music. Cool games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure. We had a lot of fun. It was a good time. But before we go on, I do also want to acknowledge just, a lot of focus is on mothers, but we also here just want to make sure we celebrate just all the women in our lives and the women who are pouring into people all over the place. I'm very fortunate that we got to celebrate my girl's aunt, Sarah, who's the youth pastor here. I'm very blessed that she's in my girls' lives, all three of them, but, she's not a mother herself, but she's definitely a strong woman who plays a significant role in raising our kids. So just a shout out to her, but all the other women too, who might not be moms for one reason or another, but are pouring into just other people, loving on them and all that good stuff.
Right. That fits well into the theme of what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
Because I think we've all had those women in our lives that were like mothers that
Right.
that prodded us on, that encouraged us, and showed us kindness along the way, that shaped our lives. And so
Absolutely.
we're thankful for that. And dads, you'll have your day.
That's
coming.
right.
It's
It's coming up soon.
Yeah.
So we'll celebrate you guys then. But for now, Dave, why don't you kind of walk us through the sermon a little bit, and then we'll kind of deep dive it.
Yeah. And so I started with, I actually started with kind of a joke, and that is what is Cookie Monster's real name?
Right.
Because Cookie Monster actually ends up being a nickname. His real name was Sid,
Right.
and it shows up. I did a little research on it a couple of times along the way.
I think he blew just about everybody's mind in the room. I was walking around there. I was like, Sid?
Yeah. The downside of doing that is like, that's the takeaway from the sermon. Yeah. But then I started with this guy named Barnabas. And if you read any of the New Testament at all and go just even a little deep, you run into Barnabas.
Yeah.
He was a critical figure in the early church, and in church planning and at Antioch, and was just an incredible leader in the first century church. But turns out his name really isn't Barnabas. Barnabas was a nickname, just like Cookie Monster was a nickname for Sid. Barnabas. And so what's encouraged, what is I think significant for us today to think about is that the reason he's called that, Barnabas literally means son of encouragement. And so he was such of an encourager that his nickname became Barnabas, son of
That's a
encouragement.
pretty cool nickname to have.
Right. And so you look at his life, and one of the first things that we read about him in the book of Acts is that he was all into the church. Last week, we had talked about giving to the church and sharing of your possessions. And he sold a piece of land and laid the proceeds at the apostles' feet. I mean, he was all in.
Right.
And then he went on Paul has kind of a notorious past, but then he had the Damascus Road experience, was converted to Christianity, and was called of God to be an apostle. But the early disciples understandably did not trust him. Who is this guy? Last week, he's trying to get us all stoned to death. He held the coats when our brother Stephen was stoned. We don't trust this guy. And Barnabas says, no. I've heard this guy's story. He's legit. And so, I mean, even in there, you see encouragement and looking for the good in people. And so, I think that you can see that time and time again about our call to be kind, but it's all sort of folds into this kind of generosity that Barnabas had. You see it in the sharing of his possessions, but you also see it in the sharing of his life and in the pouring into others. And so, a question I would have, if you think back over your life and the people that affected you, who were they and how did they encourage you? You got some people come to mind for that?
I often think of my bring up as such a, I was like really brought up by community. So I have a lot of people who have poured into me in one way or another. And, I could go to easy to like a Craig Shearer who's I've talked about on here several times,
right,
who identified me even as a leader in a church before I ever even
saw it yourself
about it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, you could go there, but I mean, I've even had women along the way of just, outside of my mom who would just come beside me and just been like, you're such a kind individual. I don't think I had a very common temperament. I think I was always a little bit different as even as a guy. Like, I mean, I was competitive in sports and stuff like that, but I've always been like kind and compassionate, especially like with kids and stuff like that. Like even at a young age, I was, kid get hurt, I'd pick them up and help them get a Band-Aid, give them a hug, make them feel better.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. So a lot of people would always come by beside me and be like, you're really good with kids. Like you have a good temperament and patient and stuff like that. So I don't know. People just encourage me a lot and help me see things in myself that are not common things, but I just assumed they were common. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So it kind of helped me identify.
So you had those sort of attributes naturally.
Yeah.
That I think Christ wants us all to grow in. When you look at the fruit of the Spirit of somebody who would show mercy and kindness and goodness and self-control and long suffering, all that stuff. Some of us have more naturally than others, but all of those I think work together, and that's all part of developing a generous heart.
Yeah.
And you never really know where it's going to come from.
Right.
Yesterday, I had the opportunity, we were talking about a little bit earlier, to jam with some guys that I used to be in a band with for a number of years, and they're all encouraging and affirming in my life. But I was thinking about a story. We practiced down near Little Five Points. That's where we would practice every week, and there was this homeless guy that kind of was there on the streets, and some people are sort of homeless by choice and some by circumstances, and there was probably some mental illness going on, but he was really kind of pretty together, and but yet he just wanted to be homeless. I mean, he wanted he kind of turned down any sort of overture of helping him to a different situation in life. He was content with where he was, but he sort of became the neighborhood watch for that neighborhood. He was like, and a lot of people in the neighborhood knew him and loved him and had conversations with him, and thought of him as being safe and actually helping the neighborhood safety. So anyway, tragically, he during the cold of winter, he died on the street, and so the pastor of the church where we used to practice in the basement tried to find out to get some information to get him a proper burial, to find next of kin and stuff. And so it gets very complicated in a situation like that where there's no known next of kin.
Yeah.
And it was hard to do. And, he's laying on a slab somewhere. This story is going someplace, trust me. So,
Not here.
so, but he had been like a guy, when we would go down the street to get pizza, he would, say he was going to watch our cars or watch our equipment or whatever. And so we decided that he needed a service, and we decided what we would do, just put on the church sign, we're going to have a concert and a sharing of testimony of this man's life from the neighborhood. And it was just incredible because all these people showed up from the neighborhood, and just the kindness and the outpouring for this homeless man touched me in great ways. But I never will forget the testimony of one of the women, and she was a single mother who had lived there in the area, and he had helped her with groceries. And we got really cold. Sometimes he would sleep in her tool shed or whatever, and she would bring blankets and stuff. And so they had this relationship. But anyway, she said to him, I never knew that I had this capacity for compassion and kindness until I met him. He brought that out in me. And so a person who might have been to herself because of giving and showing kindness to another person, she discovered this thing that was already there within her, that Christ, I think, wanted to pull out. And so that affected me, that touched me, because I think when people have experiences of affirming, encouraging other, because we're in this world where we're taught to be cynical and almost polarized and things.
Yeah.
But when we can kind of focus the other way, we can see our hearts transforming, and then our kindness and encouragement can, transform other hearts.
Yeah, and I think that's something that we have to understand, that it might look very different for each person. Sometimes it's just about finding your thing in that space of like, where is your heart drawing you to help, and and who is that? For some, it might be, we have a homeless ministry here. It might be going down and helping the homeless. For some, it might be underprivileged kids in a community. For some, it might be, special needs children. You know what I mean? Like it can be a lot. It can show itself in a lot of different ways.
Right.
And it's kind of about finding that space of like,
well,
what do you pour in?
Sometimes it's just being kind to the checkout person in the line at Kroger, who's like had people sort of griping at her all day, to show a little kindness and compassion there.
Yep.
And that can work the other way as well. I told the story on Sunday. This was in the news back around Christmas time, and I wrote it down because I thought it was such a good story. But this woman who went to the post office every week, a little bit older of a woman, and she would have a few letters and stuff, and she would always go down there to stand in line to get her stamps, to mail her few things, even though there was other ways of getting stamps, and there's certainly other ways of mailing stuff, because of how kind and what customer service, and they ask about her. And so during Christmas, she went in one day and is super, super busy. And so she's standing in the back of the line, and the person next to him said, what are you here for? He said, well, I got to mail these letters, and I need to buy some Christmas stamps. And the guy says, well, all these people here, they're like getting packages sent and stuff like that. There's a stamp machine right there, and you can mail your letters right there. And he said, yeah, but the stamp machine is not going to ask me about my arthritis. And so, would your actions cause somebody to stand in line because of getting those words of kindness or affirmation? Can you be a Barnabas like that because of being such an encourager? So I thought that was kind of a cool story.
That's a very cool story. And I like because it's simple. It's about taking advantage of just the people that person came in contact with, and just showing that little bit of extra care. It's always fascinating when you walk into a place and somebody knows your name. Like you go to a restaurant and somebody's like, Nick, how are you? And you're like, part of me is like, I've been here way too much. I need to branch out.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's kind of like, wow, they know who I am, and there's a piece of that.
Yeah, it is. And, those little acts there, it comes from having a generous heart to think about the other person first.
Yeah.
And look for the good of them, for the affirmation of them. But it's really, when you look at all the big sort of monumental gifts, you think about somebody giving a lot of money or maybe going on, some sort of complicated mission trip or starting a ministry or whatever. Right. I think the sense of what I want to communicate is that it is the everyday and almost in the mundane to find a way. That's the way we can change the world, is by changing our own hearts, allowing God to change our own hearts to pour into other people words of encouragement and affirmation, to show them little acts of kindness along the way. And it sounds super, super simple. And it sounds like in some ways it's a pretty simple sermon that I preached on Sunday, but it's some of the most difficult things to do because we get so busy, we get annoyed by things. It's tough to take the time and turn our hearts in that way where that's sort of our natural response. Now, it's hard for you because you're always a kind person doing that.
No,
yeah.
I'm a patient person. I don't know that I'm always as kind as I need to be, but I even think as I'm listening to you talk, probably one of the best examples of this is my daughter Finley.
Yeah.
She is a little note writer.
Yeah.
And she senses if you've had a long day or if you're tired or not feeling good, she always has this little note and she'll be like, I hope you feel better, Dad. I love you.
Yeah.
It's just those little things. But she even does that with some of her friends. She'll notice oh, so-and-so wasn't here. Be like, oh, I missed playing with you on the playground today. You know what I mean? Just those little bits of impacting the community that you're in already.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Taking advantage of where you're at and just being kind in those spaces.
Yeah.
I think it's cool.
And complimenting people when a compliment is due.
Yeah.
Not in a superficial, way, but in a way that is really meaningful, to saying thank you and to people that, probably maybe haven't heard it or heard it enough. And so, yeah, I think there's all those little ways, because we think about those big monumental things. And I quoted one of the scriptures from 1 Corinthians 13, we call it the love chapter.
Right.
And it's very well known, but harder for us to live out and act out.
Yeah.
And Paul talks about if you could give all your money, all your possessions, over to the church or whatever, you could do all these grandiose things. You could even be martyred for your faith. But if you're not doing it from an attitude and a heart of love, then Paul says it profits you nothing. And so, what is our motivation? Is our motivation love? That is what is pushing us to this sort of heart of generosity.
So as again, I'm in a space in my walk where I'm trying to think okay, well, what is a practical way I could try doing this? How would you encourage somebody maybe to just try to incorporate something like this into their day?
I think it probably begins with prayer, as a lot of things do.
Yeah.
I think if we're trying to do it kind of out of our own
accomplishment
or just saying my own saying, okay, I must remember to do that. I think we have to ask God to change our hearts. But then beyond that is to be attentive to the other, to be looking to the other, to be looking to those who may be having a bad day.
Yeah.
And be able to, even just give a smile or some kind of word of encouragement, to listen, to be attentive to really hearing. And sometimes you have to kind of listen with a third ear. Is that the phrase I'm looking for? Listen beyond the listening, because sometimes it's a subtext, I guess it would say.
Gotcha.
What somebody might be saying is not really what they're saying or feeling. And sometimes that comes across maybe with somebody being rude or being sort of negative. What's really going on there, and being able to hear and understand that person, not just responding to the behavior, but listening and asking God to help us show kindness to the person, because I do think it will change lives. Nothing in touch and transforms lives. Yeah.
No, I think that's good, and I like how you said just kind of just be attentive, and I think that's where a lot of us sometimes struggle is we're so busy trying to, and I'm the worst, I am not exempt from this,
right?
But going from point, I'm focused on where am I going next, I've already got the next 4 things I'm doing right here after this podcast,
right.
And I can easily put my head down walk and go do those next 4 things, or I could keep my eyes open and say, God, I've got these 4 things.
Yeah.
But if there's something you need me to do in between, make it very clear and evident to me. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
And I think those spaces of like bringing God into like, open my eyes for what you need me to see.
I like that.
And being attentive in that space, I think hopefully will bring those opportunities about.
Yeah. And I think also part of that prayer is ask God to sort of guard the words that we say. And I think it's one thing we need to be mindful of, because we live in a time where, whether it's posting online or just in conversation, we are drawn to the polar sides. We are drawn to the negative, to sort of a confrontational kind of spirit.
Yes.
And that's getting us nowhere. That's just hurting us all. And so, what I say, does it really need to be said, or does it need to be said in the way that I've said? Thinking kind of twice before we speak sometimes. I put up a quote on Sunday about, I can't remember it exactly, but it's to the sense is like, before you speak, think, are the words I'm about to say, is it going to improve the silence that is there? And if the answer is no, then maybe there's other ways, but just looking for the kind of things, because sometimes you can say the same thing. I'm not saying don't be assertive when you need to be assertive, but there's a way of doing it in kind ways.
For sure. Yeah. Words are one of those things that they can give people roses. They can also stab people in the back, and to be smart with our tongue, to be kind with it, are all very important things, and I think tone, I think there's a lot of stuff that really matter. And I keep relating back to my kids, but like, I can tell you just in my words that, if I were to say something like, hey, go clean your room, you take your 10 minutes or whatever and clean it, that's going to be received much better than if I'm like, hey, clean your room. You got 10 minutes, and just those types of things matter to my kids. And I know that's a small, simple thing, but it really does. Like, you go out into public and say, hey, how are you? Versus, hey, how are you? You know what I mean? Like, it's we're communicating all the time with our words and with our tone and stuff like that. And to show people that we genuinely care, it takes stopping and slowing down. I'll never forget, I went to the Czech Republic, and I was at a youth camp, and I was walking by one of the girls. I said, hey, how are you? And I looked at her in the face, and she goes, do you really want to know how I am? Or are you doing what other Americans do and they just keep walking? I was like, I really want to know how you are. But that was just like, their experience had been where like, it was just like a greeting, you know what I mean? More so than a stop and like, how are you doing? And, I love that you mentioned cashiers, because I remember me and my buddies, we used to go to like gas stations and stuff like that to get snacks for the times we were hanging out. But we'd always try to make the gas station clerk like smile and laugh and stuff like that.
Yeah.
More because like, it always seemed like it changed things, that they would like their demeanors and stuff were like, hey, how are you?
I don't know how many stories I've heard of that, Al, that's really going to change, because it can change somebody's day.
Yeah.
We can change somebody's day for the good or for the bad.
Right.
And, but the words we say, actions that we do. And so I do think it's an important character trait to be working on. And so this all, folds into kind of the actions that we have the generous actions that we have, and how that can transform hearts. We're probably going to be talking more about that next Sunday as we wind up this series because I think understanding, a healthy understanding of our possessions that God has blessed us with, and we're stewards of. And when we do that, then we realize that all that we've been given, including the vocabulary, the brains that we have, that is also to be stewarded in a great way and in good, healthy ways. And so, we should be, by the way we're treating people, the way we're speaking to people, being good stewards of those kinds of things. And next week we'll be focusing in on service and action and volunteering and that sort of things. But I think generosity kind of breeds generosity in a way.
Yeah.
And so if we're generous in one space, then we'll begin to get generous in another space, and it all kind of works together within, our lives.
I think when we start to understand and take account of like the good that we have, it's much easier to understand the good that we can give.
That's right.
And,
Yeah, I like that.
and I think that's just what we need, like taking an account of like, man, we really do have a lot, even on bad days, like slowing down and just going, that might have been bad, but I've got this, like, and of course there's going to be certain situations that might not feel possible, but I think if we can separate ourselves and look at the blessings we've been given, wow, like to be generous with even just our kindness and stuff like that, that would start changing things for sure.
I believe it. Well, it's been a great conversation.
Yeah.
Look forward to closing this out next week, and we've got a series coming up behind it. Well, actually, Pentecost is coming up in a couple of weeks. We got to celebrate and talk about that. And then this summer, just to give you a little preview, I'm doing a message series called Retold, but it's basically looking at Sunday school lessons that you thought some of those stories that we might know real well, but we might not remember the details, or that I've been told so much that when you go back and look at, wow, that's what the Bible said, or that story was a little bit more darker than I remember. those kinds of things. And so that's going to be a fun thing to do in the month of June. So I'm looking forward to the weeks we got ahead here, Nick.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Well, guys, as we're wrapping up here, you know how to reach us. You know how to leave us comments, whether it's on the Facebook, the YouTube. We're always trying to be in community and stuff like that. I guess as something practical to go try is just, be attentive. Pray that simple prayer of, Lord, show me what you want me to see.
Yeah.
And take advantage of it. If he shows you, you might be driving by and see somebody on the side of the road with a sign, and if there's that little tug like, hey, go give them a power bar or give them $1 or a drink, do it. Try it. It might feel awkward. It might feel weird, but just try it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, try listening to those Holy Spirit prompts and stuff like that, because I think they happen more regularly than we give them credit for.
Get more attentive to them. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but after all that, take an account, spend some time with God, try being generous and see how generosity continues to flow.
Yeah.
But as we're wrapping up, we hope you had a great Mother's Day. We have a lot of fun things coming down the pike, and we hope you'll join us for that. Dave, you got anything else to add?
Not today.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. We'll see you next time.
God bless.